Great. So I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement for UBC. That UBC's Vancouver is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish people. We'd like to acknowledge that you're all joining us today from lots of different places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands as well. We're going to be having a bit of free-form conversation at the end. Today's format's a little different. We're going to have some presentations, then we're going to be having a panel. Feel free to make liberal use of the chat area. Introduce yourself. If there's any questions or ideas coming up from the different panels, put them there. And yeah, that's a good spot. As you'll see, we're using a general Zoom rather than webinar, just to again keep things informal for today. So again, Emerging Media Community of Practice has been around since 2018. It's a collection of researchers, educators, and practitioners who share interest in emerging media and immersive technologies. Our meetings are collaborative, have been hosted by various institutions and companies in the past. We tend to meet monthly on a Friday near the end of the month. And these meetings are meant to allow the community to get together, share and discuss work, learn about innovation and immersive media and emerging technologies. We have three main purposes that underlie EMCoP. The first is to provide a forward-looking forum in which we share current projects and bring expertise to forecasting and shaping the future of this area. Second is to provide a stimulating environment where we solve concrete challenges in and around immersive technology in relation to education and research and beyond. And third is lastly to provide a strong network that brings opportunities to collaborate across different communities that care about the role of emerging media, such as virtual and augmented reality in education and research. To speak a little bit more about where we're at and where we're going, I'd like to welcome EMCoP's co-founder and who's helped shape EMCoP, Saeed Dayanatgar.
Thank you, Daniel. Welcome, everyone. As Daniel mentioned, the format for today is a bit different. It's because we are also transitioning the whole emerging media community practice at this point in its journey. The emerging media community of practice has started at UBC, but we quickly realized that this is beyond one institution. So we're lucky to have colleagues from across different universities and industry and community to join this conversation. The one thing about this community that's working together, just so open and collaborative, that we love to have this ongoing conversation, and we try to keep it up as much as we can. Now, at this point in time, we are basically planning to make it a national entity, and that's why I'm really happy to announce that we have our colleagues from across the country joining a committee. We call it a steering committee for now. But we have our colleagues from University of Victoria, University of Ottawa, Concordia University, Quantum Polytechnic, and of course UBC. And we also have members of the community and industry, nonprofit, for-profit. And today, we asked some of these members to join a conversation and basically help us set the tone for the future of this group and community. The reason we don't use webinar format, we're trying to avoid that, is just really this is a community, and we are welcoming everyone to participate. Beside the individual presentation that's going to happen in a moment, then after that, it's really a conversation. The idea is to have open conversation either through chat or turn on your camera and your microphone. We are going to stop recording at that point, so people who feel comfortable, don't feel comfortable recording their videos, then they can also participate. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Daniel, and we can hopefully start our conversations. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Saeed. Last piece I'll mention about that piece of ongoing conversation is that we're also going to be introducing a new Slack channel for the community. We realized that having the meetings once a month is fairly limiting in terms of that collaborative conversation that can be happening. So you'll see popping up in the chat here, we'll also be emailing this to folks, but an invitation to our Slack channel. So feel free to hop onto that workspace. There's an area to introduce yourself, who you are, what brings you to EMCoP, who you're affiliated with, and what you're working on, or the big questions you have around things. an area for general conversation, an area for projects, and we'll keep on evolving it as the need arises from within the community. With that, I'm going to start in on a little bit of the presentations. I'm delighted to introduce Debi Wong, who's an interdisciplinary performance artist that loves to weave together sound, text, movement, and technology to create contemporary stories. Her performances have been recognized as unique and magical and electric. As artistic director of Renaissance Opera, creative director of Orpheus VR, which is a choose your own adventure virtual reality opera that was featured in the International Film Festival in 2020. She also recently spearheaded Canada's first opera hackathon, which brought together technologists and opera creatives to hack the medium of opera. Debi, I'll let you take it away from there.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you, Saeed, and to Emerging Media Labs for hosting this and for inviting me to be part of this community and the steering committee. This is all so exciting for me. As someone who's still, I feel like I'm still relatively new to the XR space, and so I feel very honored to be here with you all. I'm going to just quickly share my screen here, which I always feel like I have to sacrifice something to the technology gods to make it work. So if at any point my presentation is not working or you cannot see me or what I'm trying to present on my slides, please feel free to stop me, or if the sound is being funny. So as Daniel said, I am the founding artistic director of Renaissance Opera, and we are also located working on the unceded ancestral and traditional lands of the Humasqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish peoples. We've been in business since 2017 as a non-for-profit arts opera organization. I'm also a co-creator and the creative director of Orpheus VR, and more recently, a new live stream series called Live from the Underworld. I thought today, just to touch on the different themes that we're bringing up, I would give you a little bit about my background, who I am, and how I've arrived where I am. And then I'm going to just share some of the examples of the things we're doing at Renaissance Opera, and hopefully give you a little bit of perspective and insight on how XR has affected my artistic practice and the work that we're doing within my company, but also how the dialogue between historical art forms and emerging media have allowed for an exciting space of innovation to open up for all of our artists, myself included. So a little background about me. Before I settled into the magical world of XR and experimenting with things that I don't really fully understand, I started as a classically trained singer, coming up through academia as with this very clear idea that I was going to be a specialist in historically informed performance practices. And as you kind of go through the academic pipeline, I feel like these things get more and more specific. So I specifically was specializing in 16th and 17th century English lute song by very specific composers, which I won't go into. So I had this very clear idea of what I was going to do with my career. I was going to roam around the world and sing with my lute player, as you can see from this photo here, and look at very famous historical works of theater and music and create performances using these art forms. Which, by the way, I still love and still occasionally do, and it's still very much a part of my ethos. So this is about 10 years ago. And just to give you a little perspective, I am going to share a short clip of the music that I used to do and the performance practice that I was engaging in, so we can compare it to what has come later. Time stands still. All other things shall change. that gives you a little bit of a painting of the kind of music that I was doing and the kind of performance practice I was in. And this was such a great space because I am a giant history nerd. I love to dig into, I love to like go through the treasure troves of musical scores that have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years and see what I come up with. I did not think that my life could get any nerdier until I started working in XR. But while I was coming up through academia, one of the things that I struggled with, I started my PhD studies about 10 years ago at the University of the Arts Helsinki, and the program there was experimental at the time. It allowed candidates to come in and propose 5 different performance projects, which they would explore different aspects of their practice. And then use that plus their dissertation as sort of the body of work to be evaluated. So at the time, I thought this was a great structure for me because it would allow me to really play and to dissect the things that I look at the historical art forms that I was interested in, take them apart, deconstruct them, find out what it was about the art that I was excited about, and distinguish that from the sort of artifice that had been put on the art forms after 400, 500 years of evolving and evergreen performance practices. So I discovered that as I pushed further and further into this realm of experimenting with form and historical practices, I started feeling less and less like I could fit in within the traditional academic structures that I was in, until I finally, in my last PhD concert, completely failed the concert because my jury asked me, "What are you doing? You can't do this because you're not a theater person. You are not a movement person. You are not a projection artist. You are not," there's a long laundry list of the things that I was not. And it was an attestation to the things that I was bringing into my practice and the spaces that I wanted to explore. So this sort of led to me thinking about what kind of structures or spaces can I create where I can explore these ideas? Is there anything that really exists that's going to support this exploration? And it led to the creation of Renaissance opera. Renaissance opera is, here's our sort of long mandate. You can read it if you'd like, or I'll give you the Coles Note versions, which is that we're really driven by innovation and collaboration. We are dedicated to telling modern stories using diverse historical art forms to really bring those stories to life in a new way. And we are especially interested in looking at the voices and storytelling media that our Vancouver and local based artists are exploring to tell those stories. One of our mottos is opera is the process, it is not the product. And it means that we are using opera as a tool to enable interdisciplinary collaboration and the coming together of many different artists and people of all walks of life with different ideas to work together to tell powerful stories. So whenever I talk about Renaissance opera and whenever I talk about opera, I like to start with, Daniel's already heard this speech, but I like to start with my 2-minute power history lesson on what opera is and the history of opera. So we are often, in music, we are often taught to study musical history through the lens of composers and the works that they have created. But what has always excited me about opera is the sort of, the design thinking part of my brain is the reason Western European opera exists in the first place. So it essentially exists because 450 years ago, I'm just losing, I'm on the wrong slide here. 450 years ago in Florence, there was an interdisciplinary group of philosophers, scientists, storytellers, singer-songwriters, theater makers, any kind of person you can think that's in the sort of like liberal and creative arts coming together, every week, probably drinking a lot of alcohol and bemoaning the state of storytelling and the arts in Florence at the turn of the 16th century. So these people are gathering every week and they're talking about what was great about storytelling and music and theater in the good old days of ancient Greece. So even though they set out to reclaim these lost historical theatrical forms from ancient Greece. They ended up they ended up putting forward proposals for new ideas and new ways of storytelling. They ended up creating different prototypes for putting forward these kinds of stories. And then they started actually producing these prototypes, and the great race for whoever could produce the very first, what is now known as the Western European opera, began. So behind this group of artists who are looking at what used to be is this group actually of innovators who are pushing forward with new ideas. And what was especially exciting is that in their sort of ideating and prototyping processes, they are also leveraging their modern technologies to make these storytelling experiences even more powerful. So I always summarize it as these sort of three things that I feel like drove the creation of Western European opera, but that is also driving us today. So we are asking today, what would opera look and feel like if it were invented today? What is essential to what we understand as Western European opera, and how can technology innovate the artists and audience experience of those essentials? And what tools and methods can we use to bring these ideas to life? So this is very much how we end up 450 years later with our specific group of, well, we don't have any philosophers on our team, I guess, yet, but we are this very multidisciplinary team of artists that are coming from all different walks of life. Again, we are developers, we are 3D artists, we are concept and storyboard artists, we're device theater people, we're script writers and film actors, opera artists, animators, composers, interactive gaming designers. And we have all come together, bound together by our desire to play in the world of make-believe and make stories for new audiences. So what I always love to look at when I'm thinking about translating a historical art form like opera for contemporary audiences is some of these early sketches of modern or early modern Baroque, early Baroque theater and opera. And what I find so interesting is the immersiveness and how the ideas of immersive storytelling were driving innovation and story creation even back then. So you can see here we've got some sketches of a Baroque set, and what I love to look at is like how they were layering in their different aspects of the set so that all of the design is drawing you, sucking you into this world. In Baroque and late Renaissance, they're very concerned with retelling these stories from ancient Greece, so that we're digging in a lot to mythology, and so these sets were also meant to give you that feeling of like when you walk into a giant cathedral, where at the bottom level we're dealing with sort of like the human plane, in the middle level we're dealing with that world building that's drawing us in, and then above us we are dealing with the realm of the gods. And what opera offered to this sort of very traditional Baroque style of theater design was the immersiveness of music. And I think that this idea of connecting with the way people were thinking about immersive storytelling 400 years ago, and then looking at what we have available to us today in the XR, in the worlds of XR and immersive, which are, booming industries. There's so much innovation, so many things are happening. I think this, to me, is where our innovation lies at Renaissance, and where we are able to really dig into new ideas. So all of these things have driven two new projects, many different projects, but two that I'm going to tell you about today. The first is Orpheus VR, which is an operatic experience in virtual reality that places a single audience member at the center of a reimagined and interactive version of Orpheus and Eurydice. It's in development, and we have our first prototype out for Oculus Quest, and it plays like a choose your own adventure. And the reason we settled on virtual reality was because of this idea of what can we use today that is immersive and will drown people in these story worlds. And in combination with the virtual reality, we've used spatialized and interactive audio. And then we really wanted to preserve the integrity of the performers in our new operatic spaces. Operatic performers use their bodies and their faces in very specific ways. And that led us to the use of motion capture to really capture the way our singers are bringing their characters to life. So I'll show you a little bit of a preview of the prototype, and then I will tell you about our second project. Oh yes, this is the quote that I hear the most with our work, that this is not opera. So you can keep that in mind too.
Welcome to the mortal world. In this place, we are prophecy. We are fate. We balance the forces of life and death. Under our right hand, nature awakens. Under our left hand, nature sleeps. Such is our right. We are incarnations of destiny, and we have come here for a reason.
So you can see how we're starting to use interactive audio, and how when you're in our Orpheus VR prototype, every interaction you make with the environment is changing the orchestration that you hear. And as you move through the experience, you have the option to determine which sort of narrative paths the characters are going to take. And as you move through them, that will also dictate how the environment responds to your interactions. This idea of bringing our audience along with us, we've been thinking about them as our co-creators as well, and people who are involved in the creation of the opera. The second project that I will give you a little glimpse of and then wrap up is, so from the Orpheus VR prototype, one of the other things that we're really committed to at Renaissance is following our joy. And we're very interested in, like, what is really making people excited when we're working on things. And working in virtual reality has been fun and challenging. And after creating our prototype, we decided to look at everything we had done and ask, how else can we engage our audiences? Are there other ways that we can translate some of the things from our prototype into an experience that is more widely accessible to people? So we created the series Eurydice Live from the Underworld, which is a new series of interactive live streams. And you watch it from any sort of tablet, mobile device, your computers. It's streamed over YouTube, but through polls, you get to interact with our storyline and again decide what kind of path our storytellers or our characters are going to take. And we've still used our motion capture, where you're doing it in real time, to keep the integrity of our opera singers coming to life, and a completely original score. So I'll show you what that looks like. Oops, here we go.
A captive here in the road and earth. Now I yearn for rebirth. I seek release. Long days I mourn, long nights forlorn. My thoughts
So that gives you a little preview of where we are. How do I stop sharing? There we go. So that gives you a little preview of where we have moved towards. And as we keep moving forward with Renaissance and with our artists, we're going to keep asking this question of how do we keep reinventing? How do we keep innovating? What is our storytelling today? And how do we use our historical inspirations to give new birth to new stories and new experiences for our audiences? So we'll stop there. I think I'm at time. I did the thing that Patrick does not like, which I did not time myself when I was getting ready. So I don't know if I have gone over, if I'm right. I can see you, Patrick, but thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you all more through this community. And I'm looking forward to my colleagues speaking next.
You didn't really go that over, did she,
Are you
Daniel?
sure?
I mean, yeah, and who cares? Like in your case, in my case, yeah, there's plenty of students of mine here, and you can call me on that if I go over, because I did it for you.
Well, thank you.
And we do have a little bit of time. If you mentioned having so many questions, Patrick, is there one or two?
Yeah, okay, Debbie, there's lots of nerds here on the call.
I love it.
Okay,
Yes.
so because I know a little bit of this, but I don't think everyone knows, like, how did you combine motion capture and facial capture for those Eurydice scenes?
Oh my gosh,
'Cause
yes.
I think people need to hear this. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, you know what? I completely forgot that we just received this great behind the scenes video, so I can share it maybe in the Slack with the community. So in our early tests of doing live from the underworld, I played the body and face of Eurydice, and we use an XSense motion capture suit that we were able to purchase through funding from BC Arts Council, and then we use the iPhone. We use Real Illusion to put it all together. So in the very first tests, I wore the suit. I had the iPhone doing the face. I didn't have anything to secure the iPhone to my face. So I bought a bike helmet and a selfie stick and some zap straps and just like made this like really extra nerdy rig to get all of these things together. But we quickly discovered that it's really hard to sing in a tightly cinched bike helmet. It's also really heavy on the head. And so anytime we were trying to do elaborate movements, the whole head of the avatar was just kind of going nuts. It was very strange, but it was a great first test. So what we do now is we actually treat the avatar like a puppet, where our opera singer Mireille Asselin, who you heard in the video, she plays the face of the character, and then we can have her standing at a music stand and we can have her mic'd really well. We don't have to worry about her moving around, which is how we're able to get some really great high quality audio. And then the body of the avatar is played by our dancer, Erika Mitsuhashi. And the way we set it up in a studio space is that Mireille will stand behind the dancer so that she can see everything that she's doing. And then there's a big TV screen in front of them so they can both see the avatar. So they're puppeting the avatar in real time. And as Erika's moving around, Mireille is trying to keep those facial expressions that seem realistic to what Erika's doing.
Wow.
And when we choose the branching narratives, they both know sort of the mood and what will come next, but there's also a lot of improvisation built into those times as well. So yeah, and it's all done live.
It was pretty seamless when I saw it. It was, you couldn't tell that it was two people.
Excellent.
Which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you.
And I mean, I find it fascinating the degree to which how you describe opera and kind of how you're playing with that is just exactly where emerging media is at as well. And this piece of bringing the pieces together and figuring out what are we doing and how do we get to kind of the core of what that is. So I'll be really interested to hear both some maybe now and as we progress of your thoughts on what that looks like within the XR world right now. What's kind of the core of that?
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of keep digging into this. And like what I think, like just really looking at, sometimes I feel like I think like everything I'm doing is new, or like everything we're doing is in a silo, and everything we're doing is like, oh my gosh, we're the first to discover this. But then I look back at opera and look at the core ideas of what's driving it. It's like, no, actually, I'm part of a much longer tradition, a much longer sort of process of iteration. And when I hear things like that's not opera, I think it's kind of funny to think that, because I'm really looking at it in a different way, that it is opera. It's part of the iterating and prototyping and pushing forward of new ideas that keep this art form evolving and coming to life. So yeah, I just saw this last question about the lip syncing, and just wanted to quickly say that there are both live instruments and other vocalists in the track that are singing depending on what's coming up in the narrative. There is like a bass track that is being played, like the background music, but all of the singing is done live and in real time. So when a narrative decision is made, I basically have to like hold up a signal saying we're doing ending A or we're doing ending B, and then the singer knows to like choose that song and then goes into it, but it's all done in real time, all very much live.
So you were a conductor. You're like the new conductor.
A little bit, yeah. You can see the
That's-
behind the scenes footage, and there's
Yeah.
lots of signaling and like
Yeah.
flapping at people, and
That's cool.
yeah, panic, yelling, yeah.
It'll be great to get those. Thanks for putting that into the EMCoP Slack. It's going to be great to get a chance to see that footage. I'm going to hop us over to Farhad in a sec, just because I want to make sure we have enough time at the end for sort of the full discussion. Thanks so much, Debi. Really, really amazing and exciting to see what you're up to.
Thank you.
I'll introduce Farhad. Farhad strives to live the good life, to serve his community, inspire others to greatness, and aspire to the greatness of others. Farhad's passion work is the creation and delivery of educational experiences that speak to the emotional and intellectual lives of learners. The organizational house he wants to build and work in values integrity, honesty, and collaboration. It's a house where creativity flourishes, where contributions are honored, and where diversity of thought, experience, and identity are welcomed. You're joining us. I know you're very involved there at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. I'll hand things over to you to tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Just a sound check. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Great. I'm really honored and excited to be here today. And thank you to Daniel for moderating, and to Saeed as well, my good friend, for bringing me into this amazing session. It's hard act to follow, Debi. I'm not a mezzo soprano, and it's probably a good thing. So you know, Patrick is at the end there, so people will have forgotten by then. But you know, I have so many thoughts I want to share, and I'm very curious about the audience's questions and perspectives as well. Maybe I'll start with the slideshow, and then I have some comments that I want to share with the audience about how I think about XR. And I would just say that I'm reasonably new to the whole domain, so I'm approaching this as a learner, as someone with the beginner's mindset, to use the concept from I guess Buddhism. Which is to explore, to ask questions, to try not to have too many assumptions. So, you know, when Debi said, you know, that she too was new to this, I resonated with that. And I suppose in some sense, because of the technology and the applications and the use cases keep changing, in a sense, we're all new. You never step into the same river twice. So I'm going to go to my slideshow here and share it. And so I've been an educator at Kwantlen Polytechnic University for about 21 years now. This image on the bottom here is our Richmond campus, and that's where the KPU...
Sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing your slides yet.
Oh, you're not? Okay. Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't share screen. That's why. Thanks for catching that, Daniel. Okay, can you see now?
Yeah. Great. We can see your whole screen there.
And we'll go to full presentation. There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Great. Yeah, so we actually have 5 campuses, Cloverdale, 2 campuses in Surrey, 1 in Langley, and this is the Richmond campus. And the VR lab is based in the Richmond campus. One of the themes for my presentation today is sort of the contradiction or the irony of how you need to be embodied and have a physical space in order to do VR and XR in general. And so, setting up a lab is quite a journey. It's a challenge at any educational institution where you have competing priorities of time and resources and so on. So the journey to get the lab took about a year. We now have a very beautiful space. It's about 30 square meters. It's got some nice glass. And we're on a floor that is shared with other research labs. So there's an opportunity for collaboration. And very excited about that. And then, of course, the pandemic hit just as the lab was opening. So we had to shift to online meetings and so on. So this next image I have is an aerial shot of Metro Vancouver. And I wanted to show you all of the kind of educational players in the ecosystem. So we have work that's being done at BCIT, and of course Emily Carr, and the CDM, Patrick is involved there. We have the Emerging Media Lab, of course. There's the VR for Children Pain Research Lab at BC Children's Hospital. And we have our friends at SFU iSpace doing great work, and then the KPU VR Lab. So I thought it was interesting to put this here again to show that there's a geography to this. There's a tangibility to this. There are centers where there are people and technologies and resources and collaborators, and they're not that far from each other. And that's important. And I haven't overlaid all of the startups or the bigger players either. And this diagram would get quite interesting and rich if we did that. This slide is the lab members, the current lab members. We've grown from about myself to about 10 student lab members. Quite a few of them are now alumni. We just had a graduate student join us yesterday. We have some faculty collaborators. So we're probably reaching critical mass in terms of what's sustainable. And these students are fantastic. They come to the lab with initiative, with curiosity, with intelligence. And my role as the mentor and as the principal investigator is really kind of to get out of their way and to unleash their potential by giving them access to resources, putting them in touch with other people who can help them, telling them about student grants and conferences and publications and the network of opportunities that exist in Metro Vancouver and beyond. And then they just constantly are surprising me with their ideas and initiatives and where they're taking things. So as an educator, as a faculty member, it is education par excellence. This is why I became an educator. It's unleashing the power of intrinsic motivation in your students. And they bring together a sort of interest in art and science and industry and all of these different domains. And they're trying to think, maybe, can I pursue this in graduate school, or maybe start my own company? And that is incredible, because that's the nature of the future state of work. So really, the VR lab is this nexus for doing research, for exploring how we can use XR in education in the classroom, and for artistic projects as well. So next slide here shows some of my students trying on some sort of Google style headsets in the classroom. So what I've done is worked with the library, and we bought 70 headsets so that the entire class can sign them out. Our classes at KPU are 35 students, so we can have 2 sections doing this simultaneously. So the students go to the library, they sign it out with their library card, they have the headset for the entire semester, so there's no barrier in terms of cost for them. And then as we progress through the course, I give them various apps or websites that they go to stream and to watch various experiences that enhance what we are learning in the class and that connect to some of our learning outcomes. And of course, the students are free to go as far and deep as they want on their own time, because they have access to the headset, and then they simply return it at the end of the semester. They get a notice from the library in the same way as they would, they have a book that's loaned out. So it's a very straightforward, kind of seamless system. So that's great. And we have a number of student-led research that's happening in the lab. So the image on the bottom left there is the lab itself. You can see some sensors set up there for the HTC Vive Pro, on the bottom right, we have a sensor that measures galvanic skin response, the GSR, which is, of course, a measure of sympathetic nervous system arousal. So, it's the kind of stuff that you would do in psychology type experiments or health related experiments. And on the top right, we have the Affectiva AI-based emotion facial recognition software that detects various types of emotional reactions based on what's happening with the eyes and the mouth and the muscles of the face and so on. So these are all, enabling tools, very much like the laser is a solution looking for problems. We now have a set of extended reality tools and biological sensors that allow us to really ask some really interesting questions where we can integrate streams of information, whether it's EMG, muscle tension, or ECG, or heart rate, GSR, emotional reactions, eye tracking. We have the Tobii glasses for doing eye tracking kind of studies. So it's really open now for doing some interesting studies. And for educating students in how research works in a very experiential learning type of platform. So the research projects that the students are doing are not trial runs. These are actual research projects. They might be helping a faculty member or a senior student. They might be doing their honors project or an industry collaboration. They have to go through the research ethics board approval process, which is complicated and iterative, and it's the real thing. They work with research participants. They have to screen them and advertise and recruit and deal with that. Complex issue of bringing participants into a lab, going through consent processes, collecting the data, storing the data, analyzing it, and then presenting the data, right, to the lab initially, but then increasingly outside to maybe local conferences or presentation workshops, and perhaps eventually even publications. And that looks fantastic for them in terms of demonstrating their research capacity if they're going to graduate school or want to work with employers in this space. So lots of rich opportunities for learning coming out of the lab. On this graph, this slide here, we have some posters. Each of these posters were created by lab members, by the way. So we launched a VR speaker series that the lab is hosting early in the summer. And you can see that we've had people that many of you probably recognize. Sean Ronan from Hammer and Tong, a local XR company. We've had Patrick Pennefather, of course, give a wonderful presentation, Fear of Mixing Out, Adventures in Mixed Reality Live Productions. And we had one of our own students who had finished her honors project talking about exploring mixed reality paradigms. And one of the talks was actually reaching out to Ontario to Dr. Nithikul Nimpulrat from ECUAD, who's done some really fantastic work with digital fabrication in VR. So these talks are open to the entire community. They are posted on our YouTube channel. They're also on our website. So they are a resource for anyone to go to and watch. They're recorded and we get permissions and so on. And it's a very free kind of flexible structure where the presenter talks for half the time and then the audience has a Q&A for about half the time. Very low stakes, non-intimidating opportunity for conversations. On this graph, you see some of the eye motions equipment showing you the kinds of things that we now have a capability for doing. GSR is here, facial expression, eye tracking, etc. And then all the integration of all of those technologies. So this slide is my last slide, I think. And here we had two students from our design school, the Wilson School of Design. They were product design students. And they had entered a national competition to design Canada's next electric vehicle. So they used their traditional prototyping and drawing skills to mock up what that car would look like. And then they entered it in this Automotive Manufacturers Parts Association contest. They were selected as one of 3 student groups across the country to enter into the final competition. At that point, they were approached. We were approached in the lab by their instructor, who said, I've heard you're doing some VR stuff. Can you help our students?" And so we lent them the equipment. and the computer via gaming quality computers and so on. And the students then were given access to Autodesk Alias, which is the industry software for designing cars in VR space. So again, leveraging what we were able to do in the lab, and then getting them to that next place. So we take them to low Earth orbit, if you can use that metaphor, and then maybe an industry partner or another group will take them to a higher state of orbit. And as an educator, that's what we do. We open doors, we create bridges, we try to show the students the various pathways that are available to them at any dimension. The students didn't win the final competition. I think it was a group at Carleton who did, but they got to the top 3, and that was a big deal for them. And of course, we were really happy for them. So that's the end of my PowerPoint presentation. So Daniel, if you want to sort of unshare and go back to the main screen, that's fine at this point. But I did have some other comments I wanted to make. For me as an educator, I mean, to be an educator is synonymous with being an optimist, right? We believe that we are doing something better in the world by sharing knowledge and unleashing the minds of our students into the world to make it a better place. So I approach this whole question of XR from a very positive, very curious kind of emotional stance. There's a bright promise of XR. It is, touching every aspect of our lives, from education, healthcare, manufacturing, entertainment, gaming, of course. There's, not a lot of industries that haven't already been affected and won't, in the near future be dramatically affected. New jobs coming out of it. And of course, it'll disrupt other industries as well, as it already has. But I also see a dark side to XR. And, this dark and light kind of view might be a reflection of my own kind of Zoroastrian ancestry, where we kind of see the universe cosmologically as a fight between good and evil. But as an educator, I also have to be a critical thinker and role model that to my students. And the problem of XR is that the range of applications I mentioned, while all exciting and creating new opportunities, also have the power of really making a lot of people unemployed, erasing certain industries. And we also have to understand that it could exaggerate existing social divides and digital divides. Not everyone is adept at using technologies. We've already discovered that in the move to online with the pandemic. People have struggled. At my own university, at the beginning days of the great migration to online, the institution offered some early retirements, and about 100 people took up the offer. This is stressful stuff, right? And these technologies are stressful. They're complex. There is a learning curve. They're glitchy. They're not perfect yet. And not everyone wants to be in these techno environments. And so if you're in an organization where you're forced to be, that's also something that we have to understand. So we're already seeing, how other technologies before XR, if you don't have access to them, they can be very disabling. If you didn't have access to a smartphone or the internet, you're left out. So, when that high-speed meta train, leaves the station, how many people who don't have a ticket are left, behind? And what are the consequences for them? So, many new technologies are, of course, embraced by visionaries. I think most of the people in this audience are visionaries or early adopters. So, we're preaching to kind of the converted here. And then the large group in the middle, when you adopt a new technology, early adopters and middle adopters and sort of laggards and so on, they will come on board to varying degrees based on incentives and socially what they see. If they see colleagues that they trust adopting the technology, then they're more likely to do it. And then sort of at the other end of the spectrum is you have your techno-Luddites who fear the technology, and sometimes for good reason, right? I mean, I think Luddite has a negative connotation, but it's historically, Debi, right? It was people who were craftspeople who were afraid of the new technologies around looms and textiles, and they had, they were being displaced in the 1800s by these new technologies, and they're gone, right? So, I don't want to too easily embrace a kind of techno-moral panic kind of narrative, which we have seen with, the internet and porn and, 5G and IoT and extended reality is now the latest one where people are just running away from it. As an educator, what it is important to do for the learners is to say, what is this technology and what can it do? What is it not? What could it be? And what should it not be? So to me, those types of 4 questions are the important questions. There is no good and unanimous answer to those questions. We're all exploring that theme. And of course, now the big technology companies want to enter this space in a very deep way. You have the conversations around the metaverse, for example. So I've more thoughts about that as well. But perhaps at this time, I might just pause and let Patrick do his presentation, and then we can engage in a broader conversation.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Farhad. It's really exciting hearing what you and the team there at Kwantlen are up to and the way that you're approaching it. And I really, we'll talk about it more when we get to the panel, but it's just really exciting to hear how much discussion around this piece around accessibility and around inclusion and around diversity, and how critical each of those pieces are to where XR goes. And the fact that all the people here, the people attending, the people who watch this later on, are a part of that community that really gets to help shape and set precedent around what that looks like. So yeah, thank you. That's great. I'll give a little introduction for Patrick. So Patrick Pennefather was recently appointed to UBC's Theatre and Film program in production and design, and is passionate about bridging partnerships between different stakeholders from academic, cultural service, and digital media industries. Here at the Emerging Media Lab, Patrick also has a role as one of our faculty in residence, and has helped us pioneer some of the ways that we're able to do things like integrated coursework with his rapid prototyping course in theater. So Patrick always brings a certain element of always emerging and disrupting and perhaps disruptive content to the different presentations that he's a part of, and to the ways that he approaches the pieces in industry. We're happy to have him as a part of our team in the Emerging Media Lab for doing so. Let's see. There's a potato on the screen. I'm going to let the potato talk now.
That was lovely. Thank you, Daniel. That was awesome. I always love intros. My hair is particularly nice today. First, I want to extend your acknowledgement by saying that I come to you as a virtualized meta-persona from the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh through the infrastructure of fiber connected to a tier 1 carrier negotiating access to other networks via settlement-free peering, as they own a sufficient amount of physical network lines across the colonized lands of this nation, known as O Canada. And cue music. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with this XR thingy we've been talking about, and those equally familiar, bringing your own bias to what it might be, I thought I'd provide an alternative perspective and consideration for all of you now. It started out as an acronym, something to do with extending reality, as if we needed technology to do that. So instead, let's get rid of the X, since X points to words like virtual, words like augmented, words like mixed, and words like demented. Wait. And so this reality, this R we speak of so lovingly, let's instead reinvent it with an underscore. Underscore reality. I know it's not as sexy, but maybe this will get us away from wanting to colonize, try and monopolize on the X of XR, as if it's something new. To think of reality as extended, So where do we stand? Or in my case, roll. So where do we roll when it comes to reinventing reality? Again and again and again. Potato solo. That was for you, Debi, and all of the new musicers out there. Okay, hang on a second. Let me switch back to a different reality as we talk through this thing called underscore reality. So this underscore reality is confusing. We are in confusing times when it comes to reality, and the fact that we're now wanting to extend our realities kind of culminates in this alternative version of what it could be. Now, think about XR as a resurgence, just like we're having resurges in other domains of our existence. That word surge is important to grasp because it's one that's popularly used right now when it comes to talking about pandemics, but it also is used to talk about XR. Why? Because there's a lot of investment happening with XR is what people are going to tell you. There's a lot of money behind it. It's I don't know, what are the stats lately? Daniel, Saeed, anyone? It's like a $3 trillion industry. Maybe. We're not quite sure what it is. But what's really happening with XR is we are starting to notice that the adoption rate is slow. Now, maybe, Farhad, that has to do with the laggards, the Luddites. Maybe it also has to do with access, with accessibility, both aspects of which are important if we are to thrive in reality development. So I thought I would veer us towards a conversation that challenges what we need to do if we are to thrive in these new reality developments that we're all engaged in. So one big thing for me is talking about bridging our realities and bridging the reality developments that we engage in. Think about it like this. I'm a university prof conducting research and teaching, but my foot is in the world of industry. My foot is in the world of the arts. I collaborate regularly and persistently. My job is really to bridge those realities so that what I teach is relevant to what the needs are of students who want to work in this reality and in XR realities, and for industry who wants students with specific skill sets to thrive. Now, we're not talking about I want you to thrive as a VR developer or an AR developer or a mixed reality developer. No, these are 21st century skills. These are the ones that talk about thriving in collaborative, adaptive, risk-taking, innovative, all of those words. And yes, Debi, prototyping environments, because we are in this space of needing to do that. So how are we going to bridge our realities is a persistent question that I ask in my own work, and I encourage all of us to ask. Are you in a university feeling siloed? It's common. So now is the time more than ever to reach out and create those partnerships, because those partnerships are important to bridge what we do in university settings with what happens outside of. We have to do this to survive and thrive in this new development area. The other is to support an ecosystem of persistent learning. Now, my language is specific, and my students know I like the word specific. And here's why: because persistent learning is the new reality. When you transition into communities of practice that you love and want to be part of, you need to keep thinking about how you are going to learn new techniques, new strategies, new production environments, new ways of being, because every single company out there has their own unique way of doing things. My job is not so much to prepare students for the overwhelming ability to thrive, knowing all of those skills prior to transitioning. It's to ensure that they can self-manage their learning and learn how to do that so that they can thrive in these environments that will demand them to learn things really, really quickly. Conversely, and I've consulted, I've done workshops, I've had conversations with colleagues in the digital media industry and in arts organizations where they too have to implement learning activities for their employees, their team members, whatever they call them, their contractors even. And so engaging in this way is going to be vital for that survival as well to happen. The third one is to share knowledge and knowing. And this one is a tricky one. This is why I made my comment about the ego-verse versus the metaverse. Now that quote actually comes from one of the first students and grads of the Master of Digital Media program where I also teach, and that's Yangos and his company Kreis Interactive, who I work with regularly. And when I talking about the meta, Farhad, he said, I think you need to substitute meta with ego. And why is that? Because it's wrapped into this protectivism, this fear of sharing because it's related to IP and copy wrong. And this is where we're making classic mistakes that are persistently made that we need to shift. Daniel, I know, is a huge open source person. So am I. Talk with me about anything I'm developing. Do you need to use it? Will it be to your advantage to try it? Awesome. Let me talk with the development team. Let's create a Creative Commons relationship together. So this is where I'm also going, because we need to really accelerate these bridges of collaboration, this sharing of knowledge, in order for us to really build an ecosystem that is both supportive and really attractive. My last point, build with your existing networks. I'm very specific again here with my language because we all have our networks, but I'm not familiar with all of the people in your networks. How can the work that I do be appealing to someone perhaps in your network? We need to be ambassadors of that networking. We need to intro people. We need to be fearless and do it quickly because those contacts and those connections are crucial in the survival. That's why this meetup. That's why we have the VR-ARA Association. That's why they have meetups. We need these meetups to happen. We need to excite people about possibility and potential. We also, as Farhad mentioned, we need to be critical about this process. We need to question the work we do, as well as put it out into the real world and get feedback from our users, our participants, our audiences, our clients, whatever we choose to call them at the time. So these are my key moments of talking about it, and then transition to, here's an example of all of these players in, I can't tell you what I'm doing January, but middle of January at the Vancouver Art Gallery, there will be an interactive installation. And these are all the players in that. We have Sawmill Motion Capture Studio. We have Kreis Interactive. Vancouver Art Gallery, of course. Emerging Media Lab has been highly supportive. UBC Libraries, giving you a hint here. UBC Theatre and Film and the Master of Digital Media program. So far, there have been, I would say, integration with, let me think now, 7 graduates from the Master of Digital Media program, minimally. 6 undergraduates from UBC Theatre and other departments at UBC. At least 5 faculty. Some are teaching, some are research faculty. This is an interconnected ecosystem. And my responsibility, I feel, in terms of my service and the service I bring to our community of practice here and to the community at large, that thank you, Farhad, for showing that map. I was just, yeah, it seems so close because it is. And every single one of those players almost, I've had some type of interaction with, as probably many of you have. So at CET, they're doing amazing work, especially with Bernard and the iSpace Lab. Some of Bernard's grad students just came back. Katerina Stepanova came back from, of all things, a VR isolation experiment that I composed music for Russian cosmonauts. Fantastic article based on this. It's a Mars isolation group, 18 months of, no wait, is it 18 months? It might be 18 months of isolation. And we created a VR experience both to understand how it related to them feeling more connected to the Earth, and also, as Farhad has indicated, the possibilities of research, trying to get data analysis from that experience. What do we want to know when we place people in isolation who might be going to another planet? Well, that's what that VR experience is hoping to capture. So you can see those integrated paths and that integrated network. And for me, I'm excited in this world. I see the dangers of it, potentially when it comes in specifically to data and how data is treated in research, how it is captured, how it is shared, what is done with the results of that data. And one thing that I wanted to note, especially, is with this indigenizing of our university, with our growing awareness of how we are on borrowed land and how we are, in a great sense, uninvited guests, that we are starting to now unravel the importance of building networks in this world, in this digital world as well, and also that we are engaged in trying to challenge traditional ways of conducting research that may not be healthy. So alongside of the data collection, it's what we do and say about that data afterwards, and our intention to want to use data in order to advance knowledge and knowing. I'll stop there. That might be provocative enough. If you need to get a hold of me, here I am. Thank you, Saeed. Thank you, Daniel, for hosting this and for continuing to put energy into these meetups, because they're essential. This is a new announcement as well in this 3D and reality capture lab that I'm sharing with EML at UBC. So let's experiment, let's play, let's bridge these realities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Patrick. So much stuff there to sort of spark discussion. With that, I'm going to stop our recording. So we're going to move into just general discussion right now. So people feel free to unmute yourselves, turn on your video, and join in the conversation.